Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sam Jacobs from 6 Degrees Investor Relations. I'll be hosting today's presentation from Melbana Energy Exec Chairman Andrew Purcell, who will be joined today by the company's Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Chris Thompson. Today's presentation will provide an update on project development at the Block 9 PSC area onshore Cuba, following the commencement of drilling of the Alameda-3 Appraisal Well, which was announced to the ASX this past Monday, December 18th. So as usual, after the presentation, we'll commence a Q&A, which will comprise both written submissions and the live questions segment. So if you'd like to join that live Q&A, just refer to your GoToWebinar control panel, click on the hand icon, that will place you in the selection queue. So just keep in mind, once selected by the moderator, you'll receive a prompt to unmute your microphone there. Select unmute and then you can proceed with your question. Attendees of previous Melbana webinars this year will be familiar with the live Q&A format, and it remains a priority of the Melbana management team to facilitate that direct engagement with shareholders. So obviously we want to conduct it in a cordial and timely manner. Just keep that in mind once you've been selected there. A copy of the webinar will be available as usual on Melbana's website and social media platforms later today, and you can download a copy of that most recent announcement by navigating to the handouts panel pane in the control panel. But for now, I'll throw things over to Andrew and Chris. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Sam. Good to be back. Thanks for the introduction, and I would like to say the opportunity is not the most timely one, a couple of days before the Christmas weekend, so thank you all for attending. I've just come back from Cuba, where we were overseeing things ahead of the start of drilling operations. I wanted to get an opportunity for you to also meet Chris, who's joined us as COO, to help us get this project into development next year. And the concept for this presentation, as always, is we'll do a quick couple of slides, but the main purpose is to answer all the questions that we receive all the time from our engaged shareholder base, which we thank you for very much. So starting on the summary page, you know, we've between ourselves done a lot of work on where we want to get to by when, which we'll develop a little bit as we talk in this presentation. But as we said at the AGM, the ambition that we have is to become a $1 billion company within the next 3 years. I think that's very achievable, given the size of the resource that we have and the support we have from our partners and regulators in Cuba. We remain well funded through this appraisal program, and the results of Alameda-2 have given us a upper sheet project with great confidence that we're working on putting together the studies, development and permitting to get that going at a real rate of production that makes an economic difference to us as quickly as possible. We're now pleased to have started the Alameda-3 well. You know, these are different opportunities, all in the same footprint, and long-term and probably keener observer of shareholders of a more recent term know that these are 3 vertically stacked reservoirs of significance, each one of them, and they're geologically independent. So this appraisal well is getting into the bottom 2. Which we think is going to be the real exciting opportunity. But the top one, we've already got a project here, and we're working hard to develop that one in the first instance. We won't focus so much on Australia in this presentation, but we've got a lot going on there. And starting to see a bit of a break in the logjam offshore Australia in the regulatory environment here. We'll hopefully see Beehive drilled sooner rather than later now. But that's in the back pocket for other work that is not the immediate focus for you or for us at the moment. The page forward. Thanks, Sam. I just summarised that diagram on the right, just to set the context for what we're doing now. If your eyes are better than mine, you can see a dotted yellow line, which we call the Alameda-3 well. It's going down to that Alameda and to that Marty sheets. They're the objectives, the primary objectives of this well. So we've kicked off, we're drilling, we're getting down nice and quickly, as Chris will show you in a moment. But the results from the top sheet, that's summarised on the left, what we know so far. We'll give you an update through the Q&A and probably in this presentation as to where we are in its interpretation. So page forward, please. Probably a good time to let Chris have his first term back. Over to you, mate. Give us a summary as to what the program is and how things are going, please.
Thanks, Andrew. The progress is going very well. As we know, with the original Alameda-3 well, which drilled down to these deeper sheets, there were some issues with that being an exploration well. There were some unknowns in terms of pressure, and so what we've done is in the preparation for this well is we've gotten all of that heavy duty equipment that you see there on the right hand side. So there's a 10,000 pound blowout preventer, which we had to have manufactured specifically to be able to safely drill this well to our TD down there at about a bit over 3,800 metres. So we're ready to go, or have been ready to go, and started on the 15th at 6 a.m. Cuba time. And to date, the rig has been making really fantastic progress. And as you can see on the time depth chart there to the left, so there is a slightly brighter green line to the left-hand side of the dash green line on that time depth chart. And that's where we are at as of today. And so we're down and we're currently opening the hole there, and we're almost down at our section TD of 425 metres. So once we get to that point, we'll be setting casing and continuing to drill on before our next point, and we will run through that in a little bit more soon. What we saw in the prior wells was really excellent drilling performance, and we have maintained a realistic time curve or range of time depth curves for the budgeting of the well, but at present we're outperforming, which is great news. So what we can
as we did with the previous well,
yeah, exactly,
came in inside the P10, which in layman's language, it exceeded our best expectations because we were drilling into something we knew was there this time, and we designed for it, and we hope to see that again here.
And in terms of objectives, our first objective will be a test of this Unit 3, and so we are expecting to be doing that test sometime around late January is where we're currently looking. And then moving on from there, we'll be cutting some cores on the way down, but then our second set of DSTs will take place, and so we'll be looking at the earliest would be late March, but it's more likely into April when we should be expecting to be conducting DSTs 2 and 3 for those deeper sections.
But lots of news flow on the way down. You recall, those of you who witnessed drilling these 2 deeper reservoirs last time, that there was lots of interesting oil influxes and flows as we go through these reservoirs. So that'll be happening immediately after we do the Unit 3 open hole test in January. So by the late January, early February, that'll be all that good stuff again coming through.
So if we move forward onto the next slide, please. So what we'll be doing here is, as I mentioned, we'll be drilling into the Unit 3 and just into the top of it, and setting our 13 3/8 casing to isolate those shallower sections. And if we continue on, and one more, please. And then we will drill about 100 metres into Unit 3, at which point we'll run our test stream. And so we'll set a packer, and we'll do an open hole DST of that Unit 3. So this is an important one because in the original Alameda-3 well, we weren't able to test this section. So it'll be great to get that confirmation, and it'll allow us to pass another discovery test and to be able to pull more of that resource as at least a contingent resource in the near term. So if we continue on, so we'll then continue drilling our 12 1/4 inch hole down through till we reach the top of the Alameda reservoir, at which point, if we progress on, we'll set out a 9 5/8 inch casing, and we'll cement that in place, so that we've got that section. Yes, and if we continue on, we'll then drill ahead in our 8.5 inch hole section through the Alameda reservoir, right through to the base of that and into the seal that sits below it, before conducting our logging, etc., of the Alameda section. And then if we continue on, we'll be running our 7-inch liner at that point, and we've got the ability to run up to 3 different tests following the running of these ECP packers. So we're giving ourselves the ability to isolate different sections of the well and test independently if that's required. And if we continue on, we'll then drill out into the Marty section. And once we've done that, we'll run our DST2. So DST2, we're going to be setting a 4.5 inch slotted liner within that Marty reservoir. And if we continue on, sorry. So we'll run that test through that slotted liner. As I said, that'll be at the earliest late March, but more likely we expect that into April. And then once we've run that test, if we continue on with our program, we'll set a removable bridge plug, which will allow us to isolate that deeper section before we progress on and run our next string and perforate the relevant sections. And we'll have the ability to do this selectively if that's desirable, and that really is going to be dependent on the logs that we run and what we see. And so once we then continue on, we'll be in a position to look at which are the best performing sections and complete all or a selected set of those zones for production.
So we'll have a second completion well at the end of this. With the Alameda-2, that'll be 2 completion wells, if all goes according to expectations, that are online, ready for production at the end of this well. And we will have that initial production data as well, which will help us to understand just what that performance is going to look like. We can then make decisions on things such as artificial lift, and is that something that we're going to need for this deeper section? And we'll be in a position to design the most appropriate system for that potential eventuality. So moving forward, the team has been working really at great pace, incorporating vast amounts of data which have come out from these wells, and the data programs that they've generated. There's continued analysis which is ongoing and continue to generate more input into our geological and engineering models, which we're using to look at things like our resource reviews, as well as our development plans, our preliminary development plans. So a very significant amount of work. We've been working with our partner and starting to socialise those concepts, starting to gather their input, as well as working with Cuba, who have been very cooperative in working with us and helping to find that best route to market for the crude. And as Andrew mentioned, we are confident we've got a project here in the shallow sheet. So we're looking at the development concept in respect of these shallow sheets, this Amistad section. And what we're looking to do over the coming period is it will continue our process throughout the coming year. And at that point, we'll also start to move into the near-term development. And the way that we'll do that is we'll look at relatively low-risk step-out wells that are providing us also with as much early information as possible, so that we're right-sizing the facilities as we move forward.
but we're doing that in a stepwise fashion. And so we continue on. So what we're looking at is, in a fairly modest sense, getting up within a relatively short period of time up into the 15,000+ barrels a day mark from this upper section, and really focused in on the 1B, and of course there is the 1A as well, which we're not forgetting about. But at present, with the high quality crude that is 1B, that's absolutely been the focus, and so that's what we're working towards.
It's a very modest development plan at this stage, regardless of the results of Alameda-3. It's just 1B. It's just this upper sheet. It's a shallow step-out program that organically funds itself from production, and it can still achieve that level of production in a very short time.
That's absolutely right. And if we progress forward here, so one of the other key things that we've been working on is looking at benchmarking the crude. So we've done some additional testing of the crude, as one would expect, and we've got samples heading out of country for PBT analysis as well externally, and we've confirmed that in the 1B we have that 18.7 API crude, and we are seeing a sulfur content of about 2.6%, which is still significantly lower than the majority of the other Cuban crudes. And if we look to regional benchmarks, we see that it's not too dissimilar to Castilla in Colombia, or Marais from Venezuela, and there are numerous others that are fairly similar in quality, and that's suggesting to us that we're probably at WTI minus 5%, say, approximately. But obviously we will be looking to get the best price possible for that crude in export. And I think that is something that we're working towards, and all parties are in agreement that that's the direction that we should be heading. It is a high quality crude, and it's deemed that's the most appropriate place to sell it.
Okay, John.
So when I was in Cuba back in October, it doesn't seem like it was that long ago now, but I guess it's a couple of months. Spent some time scoping out in the field and looking at various different pieces of infrastructure. As I said, Cuba have been good to work with there, trying to assist us to make sure that we make the most of existing infrastructure, before we have the need to construct anything else further ourselves. And at the AGM, I think you would have seen various other options that we were still investigating at the time, including up to the north of the field and potentially barging the crude round to Matanzas. But as we've continued to make fairly rapid progress on our development plans, and we're starting to do our facility scoping study, what we're seeing is that in the early stage we'll be tracking the crude. And we'll be taking that through up to the tank battery at Varadero, following the blue line there, which is the road. And we'll be able to make do with that for a considerable period of time, and we will be generating cash flow from the operations before we need to be thinking about increasing the capacity. And once we start to get to some of the significantly larger scales, we absolutely will be wanting to be piping crude from the field, and so we're looking at present at potential locations as well that would be suitable to locate an Alameda production facility, which you can see there as the APF. But the plan will be to take crude up to the Varadero tank battery, and we will be able to batch crude from there to the Matanzas supertanker port for export. And so if we just continue on. So Matanzas Supertanker Port, it's an existing deep water facility. There are 4 jetties, if you like, that accommodate different sizes of various different sizes of vessels. And it is capable of taking up to a Panamax supertanker. And so that's what we'll be looking to fill. I am hoping to go.
We're going to be looking to fill a Panamax.
Well, I think we are. Maybe with time, it might not be
in time.
Might not be in the next 6 months, but in time, absolutely. That is absolutely the goal, and I'm looking forward to going to visit Matanzas and hoping to do that early in the new year.
Great, thank you very much. That's a brief context setting. I think the purpose of the context was to throw over the questions to give you all a little bit more detail and to let you drill into the topics that mean most to you. So over to you, Sam.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew and Chris, for that presentation. Might just kick things off with a written question just in connection specifically with Alameda-3 operations. Factoring in that higher API in crude exploration is generally considered more valuable, is it expected, do you think, that the lower sheets will have a higher API content due to condition changes, for example, increases in temperature and the reduced presence of bacteria?
Yeah, that's the working thesis. That's what we're about to find out, for sure.
Yeah. Duly noted. Also on Alameda-3, will artificial lift systems be employed for the appraisal test if required?
No, not for the appraisal test. We had plenty of energetic oil inflow into the well bore. It came to surface in spades last time. Depending on those results from the appraisal test, maybe in time we'll use some artificial lift, but at this time, let's wait and see what the appraisal well delivers.
Sure thing. I'll just throw it over to the floor now. Our attendee, David Coghill, has their hand raised. David, so we've just sent you an unmute request and you're live now, David.
Yeah, thanks. Chris, Andrew. A quick question about the Alameda production facility that you referred to. What exactly is that, and why is it not closer to the well site?
Oh, it's on the western boundary. Oh, hello, Dave. It's on the western boundary of the Alameda field because we have some new pads being permitted up to the west of our existing pad. There are 3 more pads we're currently permitting, and then there's another one just northwest of it. So that's a selected spot just to the west of where all the pads eventually will be that we will use as a collation and transport and delivery point.
So if I can just jump in there as well. So one of the things that often happens, particularly with big fields, is that an initial facility will be put in close to those discovery wells. And that's handy for that initial discovery, but as the field continues to grow, and we know that this is a very large field and it is likely to grow, we want to make sure that that production facility isn't located right where we want to be drilling development wells, because that will create challenges for us down the track. So we're just trying to plan that into the development.
Right, thanks. So just a quick follow-on to that then, is there any gas handling facilities proposed in that APF?
So what we look to do is take solution gas, and we'll be using that as part of our fuel for our fuel demand, so that we can reduce any other losses due to fuel use. We will need to be generating power on site to make sure that we've got reliability of power. And so the thought is that at present that we will likely not have very large amounts of gas, and it will be solution gas rather than free gas.
Yeah, yep. Very good. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, David. And thanks, Andrew and Chris. So yeah, just moving through, continuing with our written question submissions, and again for our attendees, if anyone wants to ask a live question, just click on that hand icon in your control panel there. Yeah, Andrew and Chris, turning back to our written questions and perhaps looking at the Block 9 project more generally, one question that was submitted was, what were the production results from the second 1B production testing trial that took place?
Well, we announced all of the results of the production test and the extended early production test previously. On a roughly half-inch choke, it ran sustainably at 1,200 barrels a day from that unit 1B. What happens in the other units were reported in terms of displacement in unit 3 and the recovery to surface to 1A. So that data's all out there. That's all being studied at the moment by our reservoir engineers and by our geoscientists doing the enhancement of the volume estimates and the resource categorization upgrades. All of that's coming together nicely and going off to independent certifiers at the moment. We'll have announcements on all of these results and all of our upgraded subsurface interpretations on production, reservoir volumes. I'll get in trouble if I say what I think it'll be, so I'm going to say in February. It'll be by February.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And another question looking at the Block 9 project more broadly, another investor asked, why hasn't the project been confirmed yet as a commercial discovery, and who would be responsible for that declaration?
Well, these studies that I just referred to that we've completed internally, that we're just getting independently certified, that will be combined. As Chris said, we're going to do an open hole flow test in unit 3 on the way through with this current well. That'll give us more data that'll inform the resource categorization for this upper sheet. And then all of that together on a standalone basis could inform a commercial decision. But then we're so close to having the results from these two deeper ones as well, these two deeper reservoirs, that a commercial decision would be far better informed by knowing what their properties are too, before we make that final commitment to a field development program with the regulator.
But we absolutely have a discovery, and we are confident that we absolutely have a project that needs to be developed in the upper sheets as we stand.
Thanks, Chris. Last question on that project more broadly, just operationally, one investor asked, is there any update on the likelihood of operating additional drill rigs?
We're working on that. That's part of Chris's job, the field development program. So there's a number of lines of inquiry that are actively being run down there.
Noted, thank you. Another question came through just looking at Melbana's sort of operations more broadly, including the Beehive project in Australia. And that question was, will the cash flow from Block 9 potentially be put into these other developments, or maybe more likely return to shareholders, perhaps through dividends over the course of the next year or two?
Beehive in Australia is funded. That's a US major that's owned that property. It's paying for the well. It's doing all the field development. If it's successful, we just get a royalty. So there's no need for us to put another penny into it. The other projects we're pursuing in Australia, we've mostly done the work we're going to do there, and we're farming them out like we did with Beehive. So somebody else comes in, spends all the money. There's no cross-subsidization funding between Cuba and Australia. We keep them very separate. But to answer the other limb of the question, with regards to, I think it was distributions to shareholders, that's the point. That's the point of becoming a commercial operator. I mean, initially we find oil, we produce oil, we make money, and you want to get that return into the hands of shareholders as fast as possible, particularly because we've got, I think $160 or $170 million of tax losses on our balance sheet. So that'll make these distributions in the hands of our shareholders very tax efficient. So we're keen to get to that point as quickly as possible.
Interesting, thank you. Yeah, just turning back to the floor now. Attendee Tajinder Sekon has got their hand raised. I'll just unmute you, Tajinder. You should get your prompt. We'll just see if Tajinder comes online. Give it. Yeah,
Hi.
it looks like, Tajinder, you're live now. Can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you. Thank you very much. Congrats on the progress to date. I'm going to go to another well, Zapato. It's a unfinished business, I think, from everyone's point of view. And what are your plans to complete that across 2024?
It's always been at the back of our minds. We finished a study on it recently by doing a reassessment of the gravity and the magnetics, and what it concluded is that we were probably still a couple of 100 meters from the target formation. So that's still an elephant that's sitting out there, but it just doesn't stack up at them now as attractively as getting production online. So one day, when Chris has got an extra rig up his sleeve, and we can go back there and try and bring on another field. But for now, my focus and direction for the company is put all of our resources in the short term into getting as much production online as quickly as possible.
Great, thanks for that.
Thanks, Tajinder, and thanks, Andrew. Yeah, just turning to another one of our written submissions, this time from one of the attendees listening, attendee Frank Cunningham. This question's, again, slightly more broader, turning to a kind of macro focus, but Frank wrote, the work and focus around Alameda and Amistad is commendable. How complex do you think is work with regulators in order to export and realise best pricing?
We have all the permitting we need to export now. We don't need anything more. What we do need is to solve the logistics, which is this bloke and what he's working on with his engineering team that he's putting together. And that's not complicated because it's just up the road, and as he mentioned, there's a deep water port. And, it's a lot simpler building something on an island near the coast next to a deep water oil terminal, which you don't get given very often in the world of resource development. The pricing side of things, which is the other limb of your question, that's the game. You know, what sort of competitive tension can we drive? What are the market dynamics? It's a good quality crude, and it's proximate to a lot of refineries that want this sort of crude. So that's we've got people working on that too, and discussions going on with our chief commercial officer, who's not available to be with us today, unfortunately, but that's something he's working on. So we're enjoying the various work streams of bringing all this together to a point, to a real project.
Thanks, Andrew. Next written question from one of our attendees, this time from attendee Greg Payne. Greg asked, in your report on Monday, on 18th of December, in that ASX announcement, the company said the depth of the well would be around 40 metres true vertical depth above the high pressure zone seen in Alameda-1. Greg asked, why is that?
I have my answer. Do you want to give your answer?
Well, it's the well control answer. You know, I mean, we want to make sure that we're able to effectively test the well, and we want to make sure that we don't compromise the objectives. And if we're at that point and we've met the objectives of the well, then that's what we need to do. We need to focus on what we plan to do here and execute to that. So that's the reason.
40 metres doesn't matter. The reservoir's the column's so big.
Thanks, Andrew and Chris. Yeah, another written question from the floor. This one from Alex S. The question was, you have the wireline data and drilling mud logging data from Alameda-1 in the Marty and Alameda zones. what can you talk about what range of flow rates you're expecting from tests in these units?
We're looking forward to knowing that ourselves, but it's not far away now.
Yep, duly noted. This time, another user has just put their hand up, so we'll see if we can bring Andrew Scott online. Andrew, we've just sent you your prompts. Can you hear us there, Andrew?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yep, that's great. Thanks, mate.
Okay. Could we just roll back a couple of pages to the chart you've got of the drills for 1B, where you've got the program rolling them out for the next few years, and yet the production profile, the amount that's produced, seems to flatten out. So are you building into that an assumption that these early drill rigs start to deplete in terms of what they can produce, and that's why you're stepping out it doesn't recharge? Why isn't the additional wells keep on producing more and more oil? It seems to flatten out.
So the underlying assumption is that each of the wells does deplete effectively fairly immediately. But there's also, we have also built into here some assumptions around steps in the infrastructure. So the point at which we can fully utilise that capacity. In these large developments, it's very difficult to always fully align both the infrastructure piece and the downhole drilling piece, because you always either have too much facility for your well capacity, or too much well capacity for your facilities, and until you get to that maximum capacity, and where we're hoping to get to once we've got a bit more information, is a position where we can try and optimise that development scenario so that we can keep more of a traditional plateau that you would want to be seeing out of the development. So this was just one of the very early scenarios that we had pulled together, just to try and look at if we just organically drill and what can we achieve
In the next 3 years.
Yeah, correct.
And then let it run.
Okay, so it may not be the oil, it may be the infrastructure.
And the capital we deploy. This plan here just goes out a few years. Let's drill this many wells. And what does that look like? Well, that conceptual development with that very limited investment that can self-fund itself to that point, produces 15,000 barrels of oil by 2026. And we can just keep bumping along and adding to it without any complexity. And if this was all the project was, that's great. But no, that's not the ambition.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew Scott. Thanks for that question. And thank you, Andrew Purcell, and to Chris. Just turning back now to another written question from the floor. PAC Partners analyst Lawrence Gresh has asked another operations question on turning back to Alameda-3. The wells plan of drill stem tests expected in the Matrix formation. Lawrence asked, will this require an extended test, or can the data required be accumulated in a short space of time, like a day or two?
Not in a day or two, Lawrence. I think the way the production results come in will inform what we do, but the drilling plan has a testing plan in there that you run, you shut in for, double the period that you run to let the reservoir recharge. You can infer things from the volume of the bottle from that recharge. But I shouldn't be talking about this next to you. What do you answer Lawrence's questions in a more technical manner?
So the way we do the pressure of production testing is that we'll produce for a short period of time. We'll clean up that near wellbore area of any mud. We'll then have another short shut-in period so that the reservoir can recharge. We'll then open up for a main flow period, and the point of that is to try and get as consistent a flow as we can for a fixed period of time. We'll then shut in again and watch the pressure build up. And so we watch the pressure come down, we watch the pressure go back up, and we can analyze that data to do a transient analysis of the pressure to try and understand better the reservoir properties. So things like permeability, things like the volume that the well has observed during that short period of time, as well as the reservoir pressure. So it's really critical to get a good early reservoir pressure because that helps us longer term with things like material balance and confirming the overall pool size that we're draining with that particular well or with that particular group of wells. So that's the sort of thing that we're trying to do, and it is always fairly limited whilst you're drilling, and it needs to be, because if you sit there for too long, then the condition of the hole can start to deteriorate. And so that's the other consideration that we take into account when we're looking at designing the tests themselves, because we want to get back to drilling. You know, you have your spread rate for everything as well. It's much more expensive to be testing while you have the rig on site. And that's why we'll then also look at what we need to do in subsequent planning for any further testing or ongoing production after the rig is left site.
Thank you there, gentlemen. Another question, we've had a few questions come in around your development partner, Sonangol. So, you know, this question sort of combines, I think, queries from a few different investors, but can we talk about, has there been any feedback at this stage from Sonangol representatives about their thoughts for, you know, commercialization, development, or just feedback on the project to date?
Oh, absolutely. You know, they're a 70% partner. We're the operator. We put forward the ideas. They come back with their comments, and that's part of what was last week in Cuba for me and them with the regulators putting forward the plans for next year. No, they're very helpful. You know, it's great having the depth of talent on that bench inside that organisation that we can receive input from. Once we put up an idea, it gets honed and refined from their feedback.
Noted. Thanks, Andrew. I think, yeah, so we've worked through quite a few questions, which I think has given Andrew and Chris a good opportunity to sort of cover off some broad aspects of the project. We might sort of move towards the close now, but we've just got one more request from the floor attendee, Peter Surma. So we'll see if we can, Peter just sent you an unmute request. We'll see if we can bring Peter online. Yeah, Peter,
can you hear me?
You're live. Can you hear us?
Yes, yep. Can you hear me?
Yep, great. All good. Thanks, mate.
No worries. Good day, Chris and Andrew. Just a quick question. Would DST results be announced after each basically test has been conducted to the market? After first, second, and third test, would the results, obviously at the conclusion of each test, will there be an announcement?
Yeah, I think so. We'll be announcing things as they are material for our shareholders to know in the market, and we look forward to doing so.
Okay, thanks. And just another quick question. Chris mentioned that for now you're happy tracking the oil from upper sheets. In the immediate future, I suspect this couple of years, what would happen if both Alameda and Marty fire off? Obviously, there's no other option but to look at the pipeline. And the resulting question from that is, have you had any cost idea on to run a pipeline to the battery, to the tank battery?
Well, I've had the benefit of, for a number of years, chairing an engineering company in Australia as well that's built a number of high-pressure cross-country gas pipelines in this country. I've got a fair handle on what that costs in Australia. But that's part of Chris's remit, and he's got an engineering team that he's put together under him that are onto this task now to put more meat on the bones of that back of the envelope assessment we've done thus far. As you say, you know, we're planning for the best. It's not just a 5,000 barrel a day opportunity here. That's just where we can get to next year. We're going to assume that these other reservoirs that we're about to appraise are going to be viable, and we're planning accordingly for that, in which case we need infrastructure like pipelines. But there is one to the west, not too far, and as Chris said, so it's not like having to build it from, you know, Kalgoorlie up to Port Hedland.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, just turning to, there's a couple more questions from the floor. There are a few questions submitted on the written side, just on the corporate front, for Andrew and Chris. So we might add a couple of them in. One written question just on the corporate side was, are there any new institutions on the share register? And also just a query, can we get the top 20 published monthly on the website, as Melbana used to do?
Hard to know with instos, because they all tend to trade through nominee accounts, and the same nominee represents many instos, and I think so. If they are, they're not, you know, they're small. I think a lot of people are watching us and looking at the results that are about to be announced. But we get a lot of attention, as has been evidenced by the number of instigations of new research reports from a couple of institutions that we're very happy to welcome their attention. Lawrence, we asked the question recently. Thank you for your work on the research. And what was the second part of the question? Was about the top 20?
Yeah.
I'll have the office look at doing that again. It's a full time and effort, and everybody is busy, and we prioritise work streams accordingly. But I'll see if we can automate that somehow for you all.
Sure, thanks, Andrew. Might just turn back to one more question from the floor. Our attendee, Paul Ellis, has their hand raised. So, Paul, we've just sent you an unmute request. Wait for Paul to come online.
Yeah, thanks.
Can you hear us? Yeah.
Yeah, you got me? Yeah, thanks, Sam.
Yep.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Andrew. Merry Christmas. Thanks for taking the time to do this. My question was more around like the longer term strategy. I know you've spoken about it, Andrew, out to sort of 2026, getting up to that sort of 15,000 barrels per day, and then we'll see how we go with these deeper sections. Your strategy in Australia has been more about doing that initial legwork and then basically selling off and taking a commission. This project, it seems like the way you guys are talking is that you want to be the long-term operator there. Is there any thought that you may take a similar approach to those projects you have in Australia, where you sell off your interests and just retain a royalty and that type of thing?
Nothing's off the table, Paul. We pointed at Chris McEwen, who's not here, the Chief Commercial Officer. That's his work streams. He's engaged some advisors, some investment banks who are running processes for us on this project, as other ones are running for us on Australia. I will look forward to an interesting initial interest. I'm encouraged by it, but at the end of the day, what's the best outcome for our shareholders? Well, the best deal we can drive is to have people build this thing and start earning money whilst all of those negotiations take place in parallel. And let's see where we get to and what's best for our shareholders. If somebody says, love your project, we want to come in and take it from here, and they can build it far faster than we can with a bigger balance sheet and just leave us with a small interest but a big royalty, that's nice. In the meantime, we just get on with building the project to make that as expensive as possible for them to come in.
Yeah, got it. Makes sense. And yeah, thanks again for all your work. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you there, Andrew. Just again, looking across our questions list, there's a few questions that are sort of geared around planning out that timeline of announcements into the first half of next year. So one slightly more specific question on that front from Andrew McKinder. Andrew asked, looking at the Amistad 1B production timetable from the presentation, there's 2 wells in 2024. What month do you think they're likely to spud? And are rigs booked and contracted for these wells? Andrew asked.
The 2 wells for 2024 are the 2 new wells after this completion of this well, which is the second well, which we hope to be a second production well. So that's just showing 2 wells for next year, the second half of next year. And those studies and agreements are being done at the moment. So we don't have specifics. We're just working on the permitting and the locations and the optimizations of the locations for those production wells.
Yeah, nice one. Okay, thank you, Andrew. And another attendee, Tajinder, just had a follow-up that he submitted in writing. Can we just talk about the market communication plan for the next 3 or 4 months, and what stages do you expect to be communicating with the market on that time frame? I think that's probably a useful way to round out the questions.
Well, there's a lot of news flow coming over that time frame. As Chris alluded to, late February we're going to have open hole flow tests from Unit 3 in the upper section. In February we're going to have the announcements for the revised volume estimates for the upper sheet, as well as the reservoir properties, as well as, we hope, the upgrade in confidence in the resource categorization for the Amistad sheet. During Februare, we're going to be seeing results from drilling through the Alameda section in terms of the oil influxes into the wellbore again, and the information that we can report to the market as we do that. Going into March, we'll do the same thing, but for the Marty formation. Following March, we're starting all the flow tests down in Marty, so that information on the DSVs. After which, we're back up to the Alameda, so getting into April, May, we'll have flow tests from that formation. And then we finish the well in June and put together all the results that we have, and we'll be announcing field development plans sometime in that second quarter as to what we're doing next, over what time frame. So it's a busy year ahead, quite in addition to this well that we are now started. So we look forward to keeping you all informed, doing forums like this as and when it seems appropriate, and encourage you to contact us at any time with questions, as so many of you do, so we can help better inform the market based on your questions.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. It's a really useful way to wrap things up. So I think we'll conclude today's webinar there. Thanks again to Andrew and Chris for your time, and to all our attendees. As usual, it's another round of good engagement from the floor. So thank you to those attendees who submitted questions in writing and on the live panel. There were sort of a lot of questions across the board, so our apologies there if we didn't manage to get to everyone, but I think we covered off on a broad range of sort of operational and broader market questions. And so, yeah, it's all part of the process, as Andrew said, where Melbana looks to maintain a well-engaged dialogue with its shareholder base. As mentioned earlier, we'll put a recording of the webinar up on Melbana's website and relevant social media platforms later today. Andrew or Chris, just before we wrap up, is there any sort of final comment that you did want to add?
Have a good break, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Because our guys aren't. They're drilling away.
Yeah, season's greetings to all. That's probably a good way to go out. So thanks again, gentlemen. I think that wraps things up. Thanks again to all attendees. We'll see you in 2024.
Ciao. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.